Hi, glad to see you on your channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It's important to us. Have a good view. The mid-50s was a time of searching and reflection for the U.S. military. The Korean War showed that something was wrong with the American Army. Now its commanders had to figure out how to respond to new challenges and what troops should be in the era of a very likely atomic war. Hard choices. After the end of World War II and the first use of nuclear bombs, it was assumed that now the main task of the U.S. Army will be to protect the storage bases of atomic weapons and the countries from whose territory their carriers will be launched. And then American soldiers suddenly had to fight a full-scale war in Korea. Poorly trained American units, which were on hand in South Korea and Japan, could hardly avoid total defeat, at times retreating like crowds rather than military units. The shortage of personnel had to be made up under the Korean augmentation to the United States Army program by adding Koreans, who often did not speak English, to American units. There were also serious problems with supplies. Mines and ammunition for recoilless guns were in short supply. The troops, equipped with the latest technology, finally arrived to help, were advancing in the Korean mountains at the speed of a pedestrian. The units that broke out ahead were often surrounded and then frozen at the fixed front line, which, despite all efforts, has not moved from the place. The opponents parried each other's blows. However, this war also gave the rudiments of new tactics. Thus, the battle at Otbivnaya Height on April 16-18, 1953, showed the effectiveness of supplying troops with armored personnel carriers. According to Pentagon calculations, the combined strength of the armies of the USSR, China and their allies, easily exceeded the threshold of 4 million people and equipped with tanks, guns, and much more. After getting acquainted with the 1 million Chinese volunteers, such figures made us take them seriously. The state of the Army looked especially grim in light of the next cuts in the U.S. military budget in the mid-50s, almost doubled between 1952 and 1956 alone. The size of the U.S. Army sagged from 1.6 million men in 1952 to just over 860,000 in 1959. In addition, it could no longer hope to throw atomic bombs or shells at the enemy with impunity, depriving the Soviets of the advantage of massing forces. Now, the Soviet Union had atomic weapons as well. That is, and American forces were threatened with the very real possibility of seeing a flash from the left. Not only new weapons were required, but also a radically new troop structure to meet the demands of the atomic age. New ideas. General Maxwell Taylor, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, a veteran of World War II and the Korean War, proposed a radically new structure. Instead of the traditional ternary structure, Division, 3 regiments, division would consist of 5 combat groups, mobile and virtually autonomous, able to fight in isolation from neighbors and rear. The new division was called pentomic, from the Greek penta, 5. In terms of personnel, each combat group would correspond to a reinforced battalion of 1,356 to 1,427 men for an infantry division, 1,584 for an airborne division. Such a group would have consisted of 5 rifle companies as well as a support company with mortars, reconnaissance assets, including 2 medium-range radars and 5 short-range radars, and support units. The battle group would be both strong and flexible in structure. Total infantry division strength was reduced from 17,700, 18,800 to about 14,000 soldiers. Later plans even reduced to 7,000. To reduce vulnerability to weapons of mass destruction, the division was dispersed across the battlefield. Both along the front in a future atomic war, a stable front line could not be expected, and in depth. Under the new concept, a company occupied the same territory on any given battlefield that a regiment used to occupy, and a battle group would correspond to a corps or even an army. This was made possible by the rapid progress of several technical means. First, the development of armored personnel carriers and transport helicopters dramatically increased the mobility of troops on the battlefield. In theory, It was possible to rapidly attack or counterattack and get out of the battle before the enemy launched a nuclear strike. Ideally, an entire division with all support services could be airlifted by C-119, C-123, and C-130 transport aircraft. A company of combat aviation, including helicopters, would provide direct support to infantry division teams. Second, the development of wide-range radio communications from a full-fledged truck-mounted command post to a miniaturized helmet-mounted radio allowed the commander to maintain control of the situation, even if individual communications nodes were destroyed by an atomic blast. Experimental unmanned aerial vehicles, infrared and television cameras, and other state-of-the-art technical means incredibly expanded the possibilities of reconnaissance. Third, the ability to rain nuclear warheads, projectiles, or missiles down on the enemy allowed a battle group anywhere to parry its numerical disadvantage with overwhelming firepower. A single low-yield atomic charge was equal to more than 20,105 mm shells, and a large one was equal to the entirety of American World War II artillery. O.N.S. John, deployed in 1954. Corporal, Redstone, and other missiles with atomic warheads allowed to destroy virtually any target for tens and even hundreds of kilometers. There was even a conflict with the Air Force, which did not want to break its monopoly on strategic nuclear weapons. Some of the missiles already had mobile launchers and were ready for launch in minutes. The winged Lacrosse could even be guided from the ground by advanced scouts. In addition, the famous M3A88 Davy Crockett, the most miniaturized nuclear projectile in the history of technology, was being finalized. The Nike family of anti-aircraft guided missiles, Ajax, Hercules, and Zeus, shot down any bomber at any altitude and even ballistic missiles, while the wire-guided Dart anti-tank missile showed incredible accuracy in tests. Traditional means of warfare had also changed. The promising T-92 light tanks with 76mm cannon, fast and compact, could be transported by air on top of that. The M47 and M48 looked like a worthy answer to the Soviet tanks that had so impressed the Americans at the beginning of the Korean War. The infantry division's tank battalion consisted of 5 companies with 17 vehicles in each. Inside an M59 APC, then an M113, 17 vehicles per company of the tank division fit a squad of riflemen along with supplies for 3 days. Mules, M274, light weapons transporters could quickly transport across the battlefield, recoilless gun or installation of anti-tank missiles. The division's artillery was organized into 2 battalions, one consisting of 5 batteries of 105mm howitzers, the other a mixed battalion, consisting of 2 batteries of 155mm guns, a battery of 203mm howitzers, and a battery of O.N.S. John rockets. Atomic war infantrymen were armed with the latest M60 machine guns and M14 automatic rifles. The latter were to replace 3 small arms at once: the M3 submachine gun, carbine, and M1 semi-automatic rifle. The M14 rifle was almost half a kilogram lighter than the M1 and had a 20-round magazine instead of 8-round magazine. With bipods, the M14 could even replace the proven Bar automatic rifle. The infantry platoon received more powerful 81mm mortars and 106mm recoilless guns instead of the old 60mm mortars and 57mm recoilless guns. The first exercises to test the new concepts began in 1954 in the FRG, then continued on U.S. territory, at Fort Hood for the 1st Armored Division and at Fort Benning for the 47th Infantry Division. In 1955, at the exercise Desert Rock in Nevada, a new tank unit was located 3 kilometers from the explosion site of a 30-kiloton warhead. The first such maneuvers involving infantry were held back in 1951. 5,000 soldiers were stationed at a distance of 6 miles from the site of detonation of an atomic charge. It turned out that not only were the troops unharmed, but they were ready to fire as soon as 30 seconds after the flashover. Exercise Sagebrush in November 1955 involved 110,000 Army and 40,000 Air Force personnel. Pros of life. In May 1957, Taylor proclaimed that all infantry and airborne divisions would be converted to the new structure by the middle of the following year. However, commanding a new group in real life, rather than in propaganda movies, proved extremely difficult. Without a battalion link, a colonel with a battle group headquarters had to manage 5 companies, a battery of 107mm mortars, a tank company, artillery support 105mm and 155mm howitzers, and a reconnaissance platoon. Officers were literally drowning in a sea of information bombarding them. Despite all the technological advances, the division still lacked manageability and firepower. For example, the range of the 107mm mortar was simply not long enough to effectively support dispersed troops, and the available transportation could not get the atomic weapons to the forward positions in time. Critics pointed out that in a non-nuclear conflict, such dispersal of troops would literally provoke larger forces to destroy them. "Thank God we didn't have to go to war with a division like that," General Paul Freeman, commander of the Continental Army, said candidly. In addition, the soldiers and officers of the old divisions were unwilling to part with the traditions of their favorite units. By 1958, the exercise planners were completely detached from reality and issued those figures of casualties in an atomic war, which they liked better at any given moment. The tasks that had to be performed by the Army units were also different. For example, in September 1957, the 101st Airborne Division's combat team was used to suppress a rebellion in Little Rock, Arkansas, instead of atomic warfare. In the summer of 1958, troops had to be sent to Lebanon to support the local government. Confidence that the U.S. was still superior to the USSR in atomic weapons and their means of delivery was shattered by a small metal balloon with antennas that circled the Earth in October 1957. By the mid-60s, the promising concept had finally stalled. Instead of a big war in Europe under the shadow of atomic mushrooms, new divisions will have to go to Vietnam to fight a very different enemy and under different rules. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Forget to put a like and subscribe to the channel. It's important to us. See you soon.